Hey, I want to show you something cool. That chick in the middle is me, back when I had my chicken legs. But now, this is me, and I don't have chicken legs anymore. In fact, I'm pretty proud of my legs at this point. So how did I get them, you might ask? So that is what I'm going to tell you in this video. How I went from chicken legs to having pretty well-developed legs. And I'm going to show it in 3 exercises that are my personal favorite. So there's a lot of leg exercises to choose from, and there's a lot of different body types. So I'm not saying what works for me is going to work for everybody, but if you tend to have longer muscles, if you're a little taller, this will definitely apply to you. At least I'm pretty sure it will. And even if you're short, that's okay too. I think you're still going to get a lot out of this video. So I'm going to break down 3 exercises, and the first one's going to target quads. I love targeting quads. Second one is going to target the hamstrings, and the third one is going to target glutes. And I'm going to show you the tricks on each one, how to really lock in, help your mind-muscle connection so that you're doing these properly. And then at the end, I'm going to throw a little bonus because there is an area on our legs that a lot of people neglect. And once you grow that area, your legs could double in thickness. And that is the adductors, the inner thigh. So let me go ahead and show you these videos and we'll break it down. So there's different ways to set up for a squat. If you're looking to really target your quads here, you want your feet to be a little closer and you want to sink deeper. As you can see, my girl, my little mascot Brittany is in here with me. So always let your toes point the same direction as your knees. Do not let your knees go like this as you're going down. That's the worst thing you can do on a squat. It's very hard on the tendons around your knees. So if nothing else, make sure as you're going through the movement, you're pushing your knees out. And now I'm going to show you how to lock in. Take note of how I position the bar going into this. So people have different methods. The most effective one that I found is to have the bar resting right here on the bottom of my trap. So you don't want it to be up here on the back of your neck, and you don't want it to be so far down that you feel like your chest is being pulled open. You want it to be right here on the bottom of your trap. And I'll show you with the bar in just a minute. The other thing I want you to think of is having your hands about like this to where you can almost make a T with your arms. So this is a good space right here. You don't want your hands to be really close together. You don't really need them to be far out. Just have them in this comfortable spot right here in the middle. And what you're going to want to do is, just like we did on the overhead presses, you want to keep your wrists straight. So you don't want your wrists to be doing this. You want to keep them straight. And you also want to keep that forearm straight. So that way you're here and you're locked in. So you're going to have the bar on your back, and you're going to be simultaneously pushing forward while you're holding onto the bar and also leaning back into it. So I'm going to show you with the bar. So you want it to be at a comfortable position so that you can easily unrack it. Oh, another good note is you want to make sure you're always even on the bar. So you don't want to be off to the side here, you don't want to be off to the side here. Use the ridges in the bar to be able to measure where your hand position is and where your neck's going to rest. So that way you're right in the middle. So I'm going to measure with my hands using the ridges, and then this is how I position it. You want to get underneath it all the way and then stand up. Don't tilt over and try to pull it up with your back. Get all the way underneath it and then stand straight up. So as you can see, I'm just going to stand up here. This is about the position my arms are. And what I'm doing is, as you can see, I have it rested on the lower part of my trap, and my forearms are simultaneously pushing forward while my torso is pushing back. So I'm super locked in all the way down. So I'm not going like this. I'm locked in. So my torso is straight, my spine is neutral, and I'm pushing forward as I'm pushing back. Coming straight down, following my knees right over my toes. Before we move on to the hamstrings, a couple other extra important notes I want to mention about the quads is I like to isolate that muscle before I move on to my compound movements. So using things like quad extensions to really be able to hold that squeeze at the top of every contraction just shoot blood to that muscle group before I move into my compound is a great way to help them do extra work, because you're pre-exhausting the muscle, and that way when you move on to your compound movement, it's having to do a lot more work to move that weight. That helps them get really strong, thus grow more. So I do recommend isolation movements before your compound movements for longer muscles. And another point I want to make about targeting the quads all the way to the top on your squats is to sink as deep as you can without compromising your form. You want to really control the weight, so you want to go slow on the way down and then pause at the bottom. That'll make it more intense, and then explode up to the top and do it again. So sinking deep without compromising the form is the trick. Another exercise you can put in are sissy squats, at least that's what I call them. So I actually have another video on my channel of the sissy squats and breaking those down. But what those do is those are a compound movement that do target your quads all the way from top to bottom. It gives you a good stretch in your squat. So that's another way you can pre-exhaust them before you move on to a compound, well, another compound like a back squat. Now let's move on to hamstrings. What I love to do for hamstrings, at least as a compound lift, are stiff leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts. They are awesome, but you have to really be intentional about what you're thinking about when you move through them. Because if you don't have your mind on your hamstrings, your lower back could be doing all the work. And some people want to target their lower back on stiff leg deadlifts. I like to target my hamstrings. So I'm going to show you a video that breaks down just how to do that. Really increase that mind muscle connection, because the hamstrings can be a difficult area to really connect to sometimes. So I'm going to show you some tricks. First, I'm going to start basic. Let's start from the ground up. So you see I'm in socks. I love lifting in socks. I know you can't really do this in the gym, but anytime you're doing a leg movement, the flatter you can be on the ground, the better, because you really want to ground through all corners of your feet. If you're doing a squat, if you're doing a deadlift, whatever you're doing, especially with legs, you really want to be able to get grounded. So I love lifting in socks, if I'm being honest. And so when it comes to the straight leg or stiff leg deadlift, AKA Romanian deadlift, you're going to keep your legs straight, but you don't want to lock your knees out. So you don't want to be here and have your knees locked out. You want to keep them soft. You might even notice at certain times they feel almost bent, and that's okay as long as you're feeling it in the back of your legs. And so you can do these with dumbbells or a barbell. I'm going to show you either way. I'll start with dumbbells. So the main thing is you want to keep your toes forward, facing forward. You want to keep them about shoulder width apart. And again, you want to keep your legs straight but not locked out. And then you're going to bring the dumbbells right here in front of you. Don't death grip them and don't lift up on them as you pull up. You really just want to think about your arm as attaching you to the weight. That's it. You're not using your arms to pull the weight. The only thing you're using to pull the weight is your hamstrings and your glutes. Your lower back is going to feel it, and that's okay. Like, there's no way to take your lower back out of it, and that's perfectly fine. It's good to have a strong lower back. But I do want to make sure you're feeling it the most in your hamstrings and your glutes. So what you're going to do is you hinge at the hips, and instead of trying to keep your legs where they are in space and just folding forward, if you do that, you're going to feel it a lot in your lower back. And that's not really the goal with these for the purpose of your program. What you want to do is shift your hips back. See how my butt's moving back in space? So you can graze your legs with the weights and then come back up. So I'm going to show you the difference again. So this is how you don't want to do it. It also feels like you're going off balance because it feels like you're going to tip over. This is what you don't want to do. This is what you do want to do. So you shift your hips back and follow your legs down as low as you can until you start to feel your back either curl or you just feel a ton of pressure in your lower back. You don't need to go further than that. Ideally, you'll come down to where you feel a stretch in the back of your legs and your hamstrings, and then you pull up where you feel that stretch, squeeze your glutes at the top, and then repeat. And you can pause at the bottom because you don't want to bounce out of the hole. So you can pause at the bottom and then bring the weight up, squeeze, as opposed to using momentum to fly through them. You don't ever want to do that. So a few visual cues you can use. And I'll show you with a barbell too. It's a small one, but just so you know, you can do it with a barbell if you want to. So the visual cues I use, again, I'll show you from the side. I keep my toes straight, feet about shoulder width apart. And what I do is I think about keeping my spine neutral and keeping the bar as close to my legs as I can. And when I feel a deep stretch in my hamstrings, I take a second to put my mind on the area that I'm feeling the stretch in. For me, it's all right here. So hopefully that's where it is for you too. My arms are loose, I'm not death gripping the bar. And then I keep my mind on where the stretch is, and I imagine my hamstrings, where I'm feeling the stretch, squeezing me out of the hole. And then I squeeze my glutes at the top. And then I control it back down, neutral spine, until I feel the stretch again. And then I pull where I feel that stretch. I imagine I'm just squeezing my hamstrings to bring my torso out of the hole. And then again. So you do want to go slow and controlled through these for as long as you can. And then when you get towards the end of your set, you're going to get tired. And so you want to make sure you can always control this. You don't want to be throwing yourself down. So control it down. And then towards the end of your set, you can start really powering up to get those last few reps. And really power it up.
Okay, enough with the hammies already. Just kidding. But just like the quads, I highly recommend doing isolation work before moving into a compound like a Romanian deadlift. So things like lying hamstring curls, seated hamstring curls, even doing curls using one of those Swiss balls. Those are fun too. Something to really fire up that muscle, to really send blood flow to the hamstring. So that way, when you do your compound movement, it's going to do a lot of work. Now, I will say hamstrings can be a little complex as far as getting it in the shortened position. I mentioned before, having longer muscles means that you need to adjust some exercises to be able to get them into a shortened position. So for tall people, seated hamstring curls where you're leaning forward are a great way to do that. I would recommend throwing in seated and lying hamstring curls just to give you a little variety and make sure you're getting the muscle in that shortened position, and then move on into the stiff leg deadlifts. Okay, and lastly, the glutes. So before you do a barbell hip thrust, which is my personal preference for growing the glutes, again, going back to the tall person thing, we've got to shorten the muscle. We've got to shorten the glute, the whole glute. So some people swear that cable kickbacks don't do anything, but I'm against that. I think they absolutely do, and I think it's a great way to isolate the muscle before doing a hip thrust. So I do have a tutorial on how I set up for cable kickbacks, as well as how to do the barbell hip thrust in a way that really targets your glutes.
Use a strap like this if you do not have an ankle strap. Simply shift the grip to the side and put the ball of your foot through the strap itself. This actually gives you more support anyway, and it allows you to push off with the sole of your foot. So with glute kickbacks, you can see about where the cable is positioned, right underneath my hips, so it's not all the way to the ground. And then I'm gonna think about pushing my foot back and out to the side in an abduction motion. That's gonna again hit the top of my glutes, just like we did with those abductor movements. Let's break down the barbell hip thrust, because a lot of you are unsure if you're doing it correctly. So first of all, you get into position by rolling the bar over your legs, use a pad if you need for comfort, and then get your feet a little beyond shoulder width and make sure your knees follow your toes on the movement. You don't want your knees to be caving in. The main thing I do on this movement is I keep my spine neutral. So as you can see, I'm not bending my spine to move the weight. I'm keeping my spine straight, almost like a seesaw on the bench. And then I feel the stretch at the bottom of each rep. And at the top, I try to squeeze. Of course, that becomes hard in the end when it gets challenging. And once you can't move the weight up anymore, you slowly return it to the floor and then roll it off your legs again.
So that's pretty much it. You warm the muscles up, you make that mind-muscle connection. That mind-muscle connection is so important. Oh yeah, and then I'm gonna show you the adductors. So we've probably all heard about an adductor machine. You sit on it. Some people call it gross names like meat masher and stuff like that. Whatever you prefer, but that's a great way to warm up your adductors. And then a compound movement that a lot of people don't know about for adductors are Jefferson squats. And they're pretty old school, and it takes a lot of concentration because you got to position your toes pretty perfectly. You have to make sure that your knees are following your toes and not caving in. And at the top of each rep, you're going to squeeze your adductors. You really think with your mind, flexing your adductors. And then when you sink deep into the squat, you allow the adductors to stretch. You come back up, you squeeze them at the top. So I'm going to end this video with a short demonstration of the Jefferson squats. I hope this video helped. If it did, please leave a comment below, share it with your friends, because let's be real, there's so much information out here, you might as well learn. Y'all have a great day.